Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be doing an in-depth Season 8 guide for Sona. So thank you very much to Jenny and Star for the very generous donations. Always appreciate it. I'm going to try to do this guide a bit faster than the other ones that I've done. I know I always say that, but I'm going to honestly try to keep this to about 30 minutes or less. Just see how fast we can get through it. So you can find timestamps in the description if you don't have time to watch the whole thing, and you can also access this Google Doc in the description as well if you just want to skim and sort of read along. We're going to go through overall abilities, optimal use of those abilities, in lane, strengths, weaknesses of Sona. Then we'll talk about recommended runes, which situation you should get different runes. There are a lot of different options. Recommended items, situations you should get the different items. Then at the very end, we'll talk a little bit about matchups, when you might want to pick or when you might want to avoid her in champion select. Let's go ahead and get in here and start looking at Sona. So Sona historically has been a powerful support. She's always going to be very good in solo queue because she's very simple to play, very simple to execute. This makes her ideal for people, especially in like gold, silver, bronze. And she is viable. There are challenger Sona level players. I know Humble Diligent, who is, that's either Stunt or Olay, have played Sona in the past, so she can't even be played at the highest level. She has a very strong support. So she has 550 range. That's very good for landing auto attacks in lane. That's some of the longest range of any supports out there. Zyra has 575. But you'll find that a lot of other enchanters, not all of them, I guess most of them have 550, but champions like Karma, I believe, have like 525. So it's pretty good. That's about the same as most AD carries. So she can land some harassment. She does have roughly 12 points of mana regen early on, so that means she scales very well with Fairy Charms. So Fairy Charm is 25% of your total mana regen, so that means that if you have 12 base mana regen, then you're going to get 3 out of it, versus if you had something like 10 mana regen, you'd only get 2.5 out of it. So the fact that she has really high base mana regen makes her an excellent candidate for Fairy Charm versus someone like, I don't know, like Zyra, who's going to have a lot less, or Tarek, who's going to have a lot less. Sona gets a lot out of Fairy Charm, so that's very beneficial from her stat-wise. She is very slow. She only has 325 base move speed. That's some of the slowest move speed in the game. She only has 28 armor, which is some of the lowest armor in the game. And she only has 46 attack damage, so that's some of the lowest base attack damage in the game. And 482 health, so some of the lowest base health in the game. So her base stats are abysmally low, so she can get all in. She can get murdered early game, so you really want to be careful picking her against very aggressive champions like Leona, maybe like a Thresh, a Zyra. All these champs can definitely kill her a lot early, and she has pretty low base health regen too. So good mana regen, good range, but everything else is pretty bad. Okay, so basically every time you cast 3 spells, you're going to get a stack of power cord. Once you get 3 stacks, then the next basic ability that you cast will do a little bit of extra damage, has a little bit of AP scaling on it, and has an empowered effect. Usually, the best case in a team fight or later on will be to hit somebody with the green power cord, so you'll want to make sure you use your green aura right before you auto attack, and that will lower their damage output by 25% for 3 seconds. This can be a really, really big deal if you hit this on an assassin, or even just a frontliner like an Olaf, or something like that that's trying to dive your AD carry. Basically, it doesn't quite exhaust them, but it's like a little mini exhaust that you put on them, so that's pretty strong. The most common use of it is people use their Q in attack. This makes your power cord deal 40% extra damage, so it's quite a bit of damage, especially in the laning phase. You can use your E to apply a 40% slow for 2 seconds, which is pretty legit, so you just kind of want to pay attention when your cord's going to be up. This is like one of the few major skill expressions in Sona's kit, is using the right power cord for the right situation. So a lot of times in team fights, if you're not sure, just try to use the green one on somebody who is trying to attack some of your squishy targets. That's usually a good use, or an obvious use if your team's trying to run somebody down, hitting them with the pink one so that they're slowed down. The Q is nice in lane, but I wouldn't really use it in team fights that much. It's okay, but dealing that little bit of extra damage is often not as good as reducing the damage of the enemy, or in some cases slowing people down. Okay, so one of the good things that Sona is strong at are early game harassment. She has a pretty cheap harassment tool with her Q. They have nerfed this fairly recently, so it still does okay damage. you know, it does 60 at level 1 if you just Q and then both you and your AD carry auto attack somebody. But realistically, your AD carry is not going to hit them that often. So, you know, it's 50 for 50 damage plus your auto attack damage plus, you know, stacking up your power cord. So that's okay. If you get 3 points of this in lane, it's 60 damage. Or 60 mana, rather, for about 120 damage. So they have nerfed this quite a bit. In the preseason, she was extremely oppressive for Season 8, so she got nerfed like 11 different times. So her heal got nerfed a lot, base armor, base attack damage. Her Hymn of Valor went down quite a bit, so it used to cost way less mana. It used to be 45 mana, and it used to also do 20 on hit, which is a very big deal. And then they increased the AP ratio, but that doesn't really matter that much. They finally reduced the cost a little bit in 8.2 to make her a bit more affordable, so now it's 50 instead of 60. When it was 60, that was just ridiculous. Even at 50, it's pretty high for the low amount of damage that it does. Compared to someone like a Nami, and Nami is an apt comparison for Sona because they're both similar in respect to, they both heal and they can both be very aggressive in the laning phase. So if we look at Nami, though, Nami's going to have slightly higher base armor, slightly higher health. Still on the squishy side, she has 10 extra movement speed, which is a big deal. Her passive also increases movement speed, so she's a lot safer. And if you compare her, you know, her W, it's 85 mana at level 2, and it does 110 damage and also heals for 95. Now, this does have diminishing returns on it when it bounces to people, but you get a 95 heal and 110 damage for 85 mana. Or even at level 1, you get 70 damage and a 65 heal. That's 135 combat effectiveness. I mean, it's going to be reduced a little bit, you know, here, but basically pretty close to 135 trade power there. And healing is more beneficial than damage because you're working with resistances instead of against them. But you kind of get the idea, right? You get 135 points of stuff, right, for 70 mana versus on Sona, you know, in most cases. And you're in full control of that, too, when you're playing with Nami. You just walk up, W them, it bounces back to you, you have it. You don't have to have any input from your AD carry whatsoever, no coordination. You can just do that. Versus Sona, it's a little cheaper. It's only 50 mana, but you're only getting 50 damage worth of stuff for 50 mana. You know, that's like a 1-to-1 ratio, mana to damage output. Whereas with Nami, you know, you're getting 135 for 70 early on, which is obviously a lot more than 1-to-1. So, so you're getting almost a 2-to-1 payout on that. Not quite, but way, way more. So Nami's trading power is much heavier than Sona's early on because it has a damage and a heal into it. Where Sona ends up coming out ahead is the scaling in team fights. So Sona is specifically designed for team fight comps. Now, if we start looking at this, once you have this kind of maxed out in the mid game, or even at sort of mid range, right? If you have it at 100 damage, this can hit twice. I guess if you hit both people, like in the rosiest of scenarios, if you hit 2 people with the Q, and you and your ally both attack, and, you know, hit 2 different people, then you can do 100 damage for 50 mana. And that is a 2-to-1 ratio, which is very good. But that requires you to hit both people with the power cord. They both have to be in range, and you and your AD carry have to both attack, so that you get this on-hit bonus magic damage as well. And your AD carry most of the time is not even going to understand what this does, and they're just going to attack the minions and waste this, pretty much. So, but in the end game, where you're touching everybody with your aura, you're running around, and you're really going to be able to make use of this bonus on-hit magic damage, then you get some pretty good numbers. So, you know, it's 200 damage on cast once you have it leveled up at level 3. Then you get up to plus 100 damage if it affects 4 of your allies and yourself, and you all attack. And it has a 2.5 AP ratio. So that's massive. So in a team fight, you know, if you auto-attack, if you hit 2 people with this, and every single person gets touched and auto-attacks, then it's very, very efficient, because it's only 60 mana, and all of a sudden you're cranking out, 300 damage for 60 mana that ends up being on like a whatever cooldown, a 6-second cooldown, that gets reduced also by crescendo when you get some cooldown there. So that's really good, and after CDR it's going to be like a 5-second cooldown. So 5-second cooldown, 300 damage with a 2.5 ratio, because this is a 0.3 per person. So if you affect 5 people with it, that's 1.5. This is a 0.5 per person. You hit 2 people with it, then that's a 1.0. So you can get up to a 2.5 ratio in a team fight. So 300 damage with a 2.5 AP ratio, that's on a 5-second cooldown. That's really good. So that's where she excels, is in these 5-on-5 team fights. So you need to pick her into comps that are going to be looking for 5-on-5 team fights, and you need to, rotate around and make sure that everybody is going to get buffed up from this queue. Similar with W. Right? So the moral of the story here is, this is pretty garbage if you're only doing it yourself and you're attacking one person, right? Because you're only going to be doing 50 damage for 50 mana, which is terrible. Even at level 3, you're only going to be doing 120 damage for 60 mana, which is a really bad rate. It's just once you touch everybody and everybody gets that hit in, then that's when it starts becoming pretty good. So with W, it's very similar in that, well, this one's even more pronounced. This is awful, awful if you just heal one person with this and do not use the shield. Do not do that in lane with Sona. This is the biggest no-no with Sona, is like one person's a little bit injured and then people will try to spam their W in order to heal that person up. In a vital situation, like the person's going to die, okay, you can do it, but it is really bad. You're paying 80 mana for a 30 heal if you're only healing one person. That is god-awful. Nami's is not even that great of a heal, but you're still paying if you just use it on a single target with no bounces. But you're still healing for 65 for 70 mana. Over here, it's half of that, right? It's even less than half. It's 30 for 80 mana. That feels really bad, and this is the biggest mistake that I see Sonas make. How you want to use this, you want to have both people injured. So you need to trade. You need to tell your AD carry, go trade, do damage. And then when you both have damage on you, while you're actively fighting them and they're hitting you back, then you W. So you're getting the heal on 2 people, and you're using that shield for 25 on 2 people. Then it becomes efficient. Then you can start talking about efficiency, because then you're going to get a 60 heal. It's going to heal 2 people. And then in lane, you're going to use that shield, 25 per person. All of a sudden, now it's 80 mana for 110 heal and shield hybrid. That's not amazing, but it's okay. It starts to get respectable. And this is what you'll max first outside of the lane. So you want to have this max by, level 9, level 10, something like that, depending on how many points in Q you can get. You should get 2 or 3 points of Q in most lanes, just so you can do some kind of harassment, and then switch over to this for team fighting. Because when you start team fighting with this, all of a sudden, it gets really good. So, if you're healing 2 people, you're getting a 220 heal. You and the one other person that gets the heal. That's 110 per person. That's a 220. Then if you hit all 5 people with the shield, then you're getting 625 shield, which is a lot. So you get this 125 times 5 is 625. So now you're getting 210 plus 625 shield. So you're getting 845 combination of heal and shield for 100 mana that ends up being, on about a 4 or 5 second cooldown. That's extremely powerful, but once again, that has to be in a team fight. If you're just skirmishing with somebody, if it's just you and one other person, then you're not going to get nearly the same kind of benefit out of it, right? Because it's only going to be able to affect 2 people. So it'll still be good. It's still 210 plus 250. Right, so that's still 460, which is a good bargain. But it really starts to get to that crazy bargain territory when you're in a 5-on-5 team fight cranking this thing out. It's a lot. If you consider that, like, Janna's shield is like 210 on a single target, Nami's heal, even if it double bounces on somebody, it's not going to be, much more than, like, maybe a 350 heal or so after you deduct for the bounces. So this thing, Sona's W, is in a completely different league in 5-on-5 team fights in terms of efficiency. It's absolutely nutty just how efficient this is in a team fight. You're getting like a 7-to-1 payout or something like that with how much mana you're paying to how much this is. And it's a 2.0 AP ratio, because remember, this 0.3 applies to each person in there, right? So if you have something like 100 ability power, then it's going to give you 200 hybrid heal and shield off of this. So that's really, really strong. So that's what makes Sona strong. It's insane scaling into the mid to the late game, particularly with her W in team fights. So that, once again, is where you want to pick her for team fight comps, where you're pretty confident that you're going to be able to do 5v5s. She's the queen of 5v5 team fights. It's really, really difficult for the enemy team to win a fight against the Sona in a long fight where you're not going to burst somebody down immediately. You're just not winning a 5v5 against the Sona unless you kill her or you start bursting people out with a lot of damage. Because, like, these numbers are good over time, but it doesn't do a lot of single target healing. So if that Zed's going in on somebody and they're about to all in and do 100% of their health, you know, chipping in a little dinky 100 heal and, like, maybe 125 shield, like, that's still all right. But it's not going to give you as much protection as something like a Lulu ult or something like, you know, a Janna shield plus Janna ultimate type of stuff. So it doesn't have as much single target protection against single target burst assassins as some of the other supports have, right? But as far as team-wide healing, team-wide shielding in a team fight distributed among a bunch of other people, then it's really, really good. Okay, the W's nice. It does help you zip around the map a little bit. This is the last thing you level up, so you should get 2 or 3 points of Q in lane, then max out your W for those mid-game team fights. This you'll just kind of get when you have some extra points in it. You don't get a lot of benefit. The cooldown does go down, but you only go from 10% move speed to 14%, so you only get 1% per point in it. So it's not really designed to put a lot of points in this. But it's nice. It helps you and your allies kind of zip around the map a little bit faster. 10% extra movement speed. So it's not insane, but it's okay. It's nice mobility. Finally, you have your ult. They raised the cooldown on this a while ago, too. It used to only be 120, I think, back in the day. It does very moderate damage. It does lower the cooldown of all your other abilities by 25%. Now, this stacks multiplicatively with cooldown reduction. So what that means is, like, if you get this 40% cooldown reduction and you have 40% CDR, that's not 80% total cooldown reduction on your abilities, okay? So how that works, and this is how all CDR stacking works, is let's say that you have something that's 100 cooldown, just for easy math, right? Let's say that you have a level 3 ult here. If it were just a point, if these stacked additively, 40 plus 40, then you would do 0.8 times 100 would be 80 seconds reduction, right? So it would only be a 20-second cooldown. That's not how it works. So you do 100 times 0.4. So that's for the 40% reduction off of the passive here, or off of your ultimate passive, I guess. That takes you down to actually you do 0.6 because it's 40 reduced. There we go. To 60 seconds. Then you apply the additional CDR after that, so times an additional 0.6 because you're taking off an extra 40%, and that takes you down to a 36-second cooldown. So instead of a 20-second cooldown, it becomes a 36-second cooldown. So it is really good. It's just not as overpowered as you might think at first glance with this right here. So it's still really nice, but it's not as overpowered as people think. Okay. So in lane, the biggest deal, once again, is if possible, whenever you use your Q, you definitely need to make sure you auto-attack with your Q, because if you just Q without auto-attacking, you're losing out on damage. Ideally, you need to try to hit 2 people with this, so make sure both enemies are in lane, or like in range, which is rare, but it can happen. And then also, you know, try to get your AD carry to trade with you whenever you activate your Q. That's probably not going to happen, but that's the ideal circumstance, where you hit 2 people with this, and your AD carry actually auto-attacks for this bonus damage. Now, with the W, it's very similar. You need to wait until both people are hurt. That's at a bare minimum. You need to be healing 2 people. You can't be healing 1 person with this. So if your AD carry is injured, go up and trade with your Q. See if you can get the enemy to hit you once or twice while you trade with the Q, and then use your W. I mean, don't give them free hits. They'll like walk up and force a trade, walk up and auto attack, or walk up and Q and auto attack. Usually they'll hit you back, or at least the minions will hit you back a little bit or something. Put a little bit of damage on yourself. Then use that W to heal yourself and your AD carry, and ideally you're using it as a shield also to block some of those minion hits or to block some of those auto attacks from the enemy. So you can't make your AD carry come up and trade with you so that you use their shield as well, but you can at a bare minimum make sure you're healing 2 people, and then also make sure that you are personally involved in a trade when you do this so that you use the shield. Then that way you're using at least 1 shield, you're getting 2 heals out of it, and so you're getting 85 value out of it for 80 cost early on. So that's about as good as you're going to get a lot of the time. But that's how you want to do it. You have to be efficient with her because her mana cost and her damage output are balanced around being terrible for one-on-one trades and being pretty terrible for small skirmishes too. She really shines in team fights. Now, I've heard that there is this like 16-year-old girl that's like a challenger or something on Sona that plays her mid lane. I haven't really investigated that. I don't recommend that for these reasons, in that I don't think that she's that great, at least statistically, mathematically here, when she's involved in just one-on-one trades. So I don't know. You can do it if you want, but I think she's balanced around not being able to do that very well. Now, similarly, we'll talk about, well, let's talk about it when we get to items, so I don't recommend Lichbane, but... So just a recap of her strengths, she has good poke in lane, pretty okay healing in lane. It's good if you're healing 2 people and if you're using that shield actively while you're involved in trades. Especially once you get like 3 levels in it. Because the base cost is really high, 80 is exorbitant early on, but it only goes up by 5 per level. So once you get like 3 points in this, it gets a lot more efficient, right? You're getting 2 heals, that's 140. Then if you can use at least one of those shields, then you get an extra 75, so that'd be 215 total damage healed and shielded. Which is pretty good for 90. If you think about like, you know, a Janna maxed out E is going to be 210. And it's also going to cost like 100 or 110 mana, something like that. So at level 3, it gets comparable to a Janna shield in terms of damage mitigation, if you're using it appropriately in the ways I just described. Healing 2 people, shielding at least you. Okay, so she has fantastic scaling with AP and plus healing. It's really, really good. And she has a great teamfight ultimate, you know, point click. Well, it is a skill shot. You can miss it, but it's pretty close to a point click multi-person stun for 1.5 seconds. So a really high impact. So this is obviously great when you can chain it together with other CC, like a Varus, like a Misfortune. Misfortune obviously is not much CC, but with her ultimate, that is, with an Ash Arrow. So anyone that has like some CC that you can chain together, just really heavy area of effect damage, then it's pretty good. So once again, much better in a team fight than it is in kind of a one-on-one or a two-on-two skirmish. Doesn't have a lot of damage to it, you know, relatively. It's 150, 250. So it's okay, but it's nothing crazy. Her weaknesses are that she's very squishy. She has low mobility, no escapes, limited single target buffs, like we just talked about. Great in team fights, but not a lot to protect you against a single target high burst assassin who's trying to kill either you or the AD carry really quickly. Then she has very limited crowd control. So really all she can do is, if her ult's up, she can ult for a 1.5 second stun. She can kind of slow people with her E, very limited slow, and she can put a little mini exhaust on people with her W, which is not a crowd control, but it is a damage reduction. But still, that is a very low amount of crowd control compared to someone like Janna or Nami or even Lulu. They're all going to have way better crowd control techniques. I mean, Nami has like this, which is a potential multi-target stun. She has a slow here on her E. And she has her tidal wave, which is a knock-up plus a really big slow as well. Think about, you know, Lulu. She's got a slow off of her Q. She has a knock-up and a slow with her ult. And then she has, of course, her polymorph, which is like a 2.25 second disable. So she's really lacking in terms of crowd control. But she makes up for that with huge teamfight scaling. Okay, so recommended runes. We're going to fly through and see if we can get this done, finish this up in about 10 minutes. Yeah, that'll look great. Okay, so as far as rune goes, You always want area on her. This is just excellent because you can auto attack and trade with Q so much early on. And then you have a lot of repeatable heals and shields that are going to be on low cooldowns, as the game progresses. And so you can really make great use of this shielding. So anyone who can harass early that's an enchanter that also scales pretty well later on with healing and shielding is great. I mean, this is not a trivial shield. I mean, in the mid game, when you look at Aerie, around level 9, that's 54 shield. Like, that's a lot of shield on somebody that's pretty much on a 2-second cooldown, right? Especially when you're healing your own allies and you're going to be very close to them, it returns to you almost instantly. So you can do this like every 3 seconds or so. Every time your W's up, you're pretty much getting an extra, 54 shield. And it also has a 0.25 AP ratio. So if you get 100 AP, which is not that hard to do with Sona, if you go for an Ardent Sensor fairly early and then using your runes and that kind of stuff, it's pretty easy to get to that number. So that it would give you like 75 extra shield. And when your base shield on your W is 125, that's a lot of extra shield. So Aerie is very, very good. You always want to take that. Mana flow ban. Sona has some serious mana problems early on. We just talked about, especially with her W, is base 80 mana cost. That's huge. Her cost on this is actually pretty high too, given how often you can spam this. So you really, really want that mana flow banned. Celerity is a little bit more debatable. I think this is something that you kind of have, not for the ability power. That doesn't matter as much on this, but it's that 3% move speed. Getting the extra 10 move speed off of this rune is tremendous, especially because she's so slow. She only has 325 base movement speed. So the extra movement speed helps you rotate faster, helps you dodge skill shots, helps you rotate around and make sure that you're touching everyone with your auras. So speed is really kind of the name of the game here. It's really strong. Transcendence is obviously nice. It's a cute ability, level 10. You get an extra 10% CDR. But the thing is, her cooldowns are already going to be pretty low. Everything's going to be in the 5-second range in the mid-game, except for her ult, which is impactful. But she just doesn't need cooldown reduction as much as other champs out there, because she already has pretty low cooldown. So is it nice? Yes. But it's a luxury. It's a luxury. You really need to be a lot safer. And pick something like Celerity. And then finally, it's up to you. I think Scorch in most lanes is what you'll want here. It doesn't sound like much, just dealing an extra, 20 to 30 damage in the laning phase. But it does add up. It's very easy to trigger this because you have a Q that's almost always going to be up. So you can trigger this fairly often, and being able to trigger it 3 times per minute. I mean, think about it this way. If you hit somebody for an average, during the laning phase of like maybe 25 every time you do this, and you do it 3 times per minute, that's 75 damage. Maybe you're in the lane for 3 minutes before you have to back early on. That's 75 times 3. That's 225 damage. Right? So think about it that way. If you deal 225 free damage off of this rune during the laning phase before people back, that's a lot. I mean, 225, they're probably going to have, let's say that early on they have an average of 35 magic resist or something. We'll call it 40 magic resist just to be generous. You do 100 divided by 140. That gives you the percentage that they're going to take of your magic damage in the lane times 225. Means you're dealing, after magic resist, you're dealing 161 damage. Which is a lot. If you think about the base health on some of these AD carries after they get their Doran shield or Doran's, whatever, they're probably going to have like maybe 650 health, maybe 700 health. That's a lot. So if you do like this divided by, let's say they have like 700 health in the early game, you're basically removing 23% of their health with this. If you start thinking about it percentage-wise like that for a minor rune, to basically say target enemy loses 23% of their health during the laning phase, that's a lot. So that's why this is so powerful, is because you can do it over and over and over again. It's very easy to proc. And if you do this over the course of like 3 minutes, it really does add up in the early game. And, you might deny CS from this. In some serious trades early game, maybe they get really low and scared and they can't go up to the minion wave anymore. And they miss 2, 3, 4, 10 CS maybe. Right? If you can get them to miss even 5 CS in the laning phase, if those CS on average are like maybe 15 gold each or something, It's probably a little bit higher than that. Let's say they're 17 gold each. It's like 85 gold. So it does add up. It doesn't seem like it's a lot. I had someone on stream the other day say, well, what's the point in taking this? It's not a lot of damage. There's a reason almost everybody takes this, right, when they go into sorcery. Now, it has been nerfed. It used to do 30 to 60. But it's still really, really good. It's a lot of damage. Now, on the flip side, if you can't safely go up and auto attack, if you're going to have a lot of problems with that, you can take Gathering Storm. And this is great later on in the game, right? Because she does have fantastic AP scaling, like we talked about before. You know, but at 20 minutes, you're only going to get 24 AP, which is good. I mean, that's about a 522 gold value at 20 minutes. That's great. But you have absolutely no early game pressure, so you're not going to be able to pressure people as much. So if you pick Sona and you're in a lane that you know is going to get completely bulldozed, so if you're against something like a Draven Zyra or like a Jhin Nami or something like that, and you have like Sona Ezreal or like Sona Twitch or some other like really weak early game matchup, then yeah, you can take Gathering Storm and just try to scale up for the late game. But if you think you have any chance at all to do a lot of harassment and to try to take over the game early, then you should go with Scorch. So it just kind of depends. If you think you're going to get bulldozed, you can go with Gathering Storm. If you think it's a relatively easy lane or you have the advantage, then you should go for Scorch, so you can apply more pressure early on. So that's pretty much it in terms of the core runes. You always go Airy. You always go Mana Flow Band. You should go Celerity a lot, like 99% of the time. And then this is mostly you should lean towards Scorch, but if you're going to get completely destroyed in lane, you could maybe go Gathering Storm. As far as secondary runes go, there's a lot more flexibility here. So there, you basically have three options for three different situations here. So number one is they pick something that has an all-in and is very scary against you. So you should not pick Sona if they have an all-in champion like a Leona, like a a Zyra. It's kind of scary into Thresh. But anything that's going to jump in and fight you a lot. It's scary against things like Draven or Jhin early game. But sometimes, you might pick Sona, third pick, you don't know who their AD carry is or their support, and then they just counter pick you. And so they have a really strong all-in lane, and you're very scared. Or maybe you're just a one-trick Sona, and you just want to force it no matter what in every matchup. This is the best thing against all-in. So as your secondary runes, you need to go for Bone Plating. This gives you a heck of a lot of protection every 45 seconds against those all-ins, which is nice because they probably won't try to all-in you more than, once every wave or two. So that helps out a lot. And then the extra 60 health early off of Chrysalis is great, and then that transitions into 15 ability power later on, which is also pretty respectable. So you want to go Bone Plating and Chrysalis versus all-ins. You used to get this pretty much all the time, every time, from patch like 8.6, but they did nerf the health on this by quite a lot as your secondary, so it's only 15 base health now instead of 65. So it doesn't give you nearly as much health as it used to, but it still is the go-to selection if you're in an all-in lane. Okay? Another option would be Footwear plus Biscuits, or Footwear Cosmic. So this is really common. This is what you'll see on most top-end enchanters because this is just a really generic value proposition. So if you get magical footwear, you get free boots. This is worth roughly like 375 gold, 375 to 400 gold, depending on how you're valuing the movement speed. So that's pretty good. Cosmic Insight, once again, there's not a precise amount here, but 5% cooldown reduction. Cooldown reduction is worth 25 each. That's 125 gold each for just the cooldown reduction. And it depends on how you want to value summoner spells and item actives. If you value it the same way as cooldown reduction, which seems fair-ish, then that's a 375 gold proposition. And, you get that extra 5% over the cap capacity kind of on the house there. So that's probably similar to like a 375 to 400 gold value, much like magical footwear. And then the biscuit delivery system is okay. Like, it's not amazing in lane. It doesn't give you back a ton of health. So if you're missing like 400 health, if you're missing most of your health, if you're at like 20% and you use this, then you would only get back 60 health. You do get back 15% of your missing mana as well. So if you're missing, 400 mana, it would give you 60 mana. So 60 health, 60 mana. So it does give you some permanent mana as well, I believe. Yeah, 40 permanent mana, which is worth like 45 gold or something. I think it's 1.3 value per mana. Yeah, so like 52 gold value there. So, you end up walking away with about 200 gold value off of this after you use all 4 biscuits, and you get like a dinky potion, but it does help, and you can stack biscuit with potions, so you can heal up relatively quickly. And Sona is a mana hog early on, so the biscuit delivery system does help out. So if you're against kind of a pushover lane, if you're against like a Tom Kench or a Janna, Ezreal, something like that, you can go for a greedy build like Magical Footwear plus Cosmic, which is pretty common. And then you're getting kind of the maximum value proposition here. You're getting like the, 750 free gold value out of this. So that's really strong. That's going to ultimately give you a lot more power in the mid to the late game and a lot more power early on than something like Bone Plating or Chrysalis, which are both good, but they aren't as much raw gold value as the other one. So a good way to split the difference here is if you're just kind of in a moderate lane where you want some early game power, but you want to balance it out, then you could go something like Cosmic Insight Biscuit or Footwear Biscuit. Footwear doesn't kick in until later on, so a lot of people just go Cosmic Insight Biscuit because you get the 5% CDR right away, or the 5% CDR on everything right away. So you can kind of feel it out there and just see if you want maximum greed. If it's a super easy lane, you can go Magical Footwear Cosmic. If you kind of want to negotiate a little bit, you want like the really kind of safe early game kind of pick, you can get Cosmic Insight versus Biscuit Delivery if it's about an even lane. If you do want boots later on, then you can go Boots, Biscuit if you'd like. Maybe if you're not going to get any item actives, like if you want to rush like Ardent, Athene's Unholy Grail or something like that, and you're not really going to make use of the 5% item active, then you could go Magical Footwear instead of Biscuit. The other one, which is kind of like a Strategy Professor special here, which I don't see a lot of people doing, but I think can be pretty good, is Taste of Blood, Ingenious Hunter. So this build does give you early game healing, and I've done the math on this before. Taste of Blood gives you a lot more healing than Biscuit does. I mean, if you think you're getting like maybe 21 on average every 20 seconds, a 21 heal, then that's going to heal you for 63. We just talked about biscuits. If you're missing 400 health, you're going to heal for 60, and you only get a biscuit every 3 minutes. So you can basically heal for 60 every 3 minutes, or you can heal for 60 every single minute with Taste of Blood. This is so easy to trigger. You just auto attack, or even your Q will trigger this. So you're going to be healing for a lot more off of Taste of Blood. Now, you don't get mana back, but usually with Sona, like we'll talk about in a second, you have to get Tear of the Goddess anyways, and so mana is not really an issue after your first or second back anyways. So it's a good option for that. And then you also get Ingenious Hunter. This is great if you're going to have 2 or more item actives in your build. This also affects sweepers, so it gives you really good vision control later on in the game. But if you see yourself getting something like a Redemption and a Mikhail's early on, this is the most common time when you would want Ingenious. So if they have very hard CC that you're really scared of, if they have like Leona or Ashe, Thresh, Sejuani, Lissandra, Fiddlesticks, Lulu, Varus. So anything that's going to have like pretty consistent, very powerful crowd control effects, then you'll probably want to get a Mikhail's as either your first or your second item. And if you're getting Mikhail's, you're kind of priced into getting Redemption, because Redemption scales so well with plus healing and shielding, and you get plus 20 off of the Mikhail's. And so, if they have a lot of CC, you're probably going to want to go Redemption Mikhail's, or Mikhail's Rush even into Redemption. And if you're going to do that, if you're going to have 2 really powerful item actives, then Ingenious Hunter makes sense. So you would want to do this if you're in kind of a medium, even lane, or an easy lane, you can go Ingenious. If it's a really hard lane, you're probably still going to have to go for Chrysalis Bone Plating. So if it's Leona, it's a tough call because you want Mikhail's, you want Ingenious, but you also don't want to die in lane, so you probably still have to go Bone Plating Chrysalis against a lot of Leona lanes, unless maybe it's like Leona Ezreal or something. You might be able to get away with going for this build. But this is pretty much I'm going to go double item active early on. I'm not going to get Ardent Censer early on. And we're going to go for sort of some healing and then mid-game dominance with Ingenious Hunter. So you're not going to have any power early on with this. So you want to make sure that you're going to be in an even or a dominant lane position. But it's going to scale and be much, much more impactful than the Cosmic Insight builds from Inspiration. Once you get a few stacks on this, and it's very easy to get, all you have to get are assists, and it stacks up really quick. And especially because you should be picking Sona into big team fight compositions, then it should be very, very easy to stack up and get a bunch of stack this up pretty quickly. So this is excellent from like 15 minutes onward. Once you get maybe 3 stacks on this, it becomes very, very valuable. And it's a 28% cooldown even at 3 stacks, and then 40% once it's maxed out. So that's really, really good because Redemption and Mikhail's are basically just as powerful as many ultimates in the game. I mean, Mikhail's is basically a cleanse on a stick. So it's like just as powerful as a summoner cooldown for the most part. Not quite as strong, but it's close. It's in the conversation. And then, of course, Redemption is just massive as well. And she likes having a lot of plus healing and shielding, right? So 30% plus healing and shielding is ridiculously strong with her W. So that's really good. So you don't have to go Ardent every time, although Ardent is extremely good on her. If you need that Mikhail's, if you need that cleanse, then that's a pretty good build for you. Okay, as far as items go, and then we'll end here pretty soon. Hope for the next 5 minutes or so. We didn't get it done in 30, but maybe we can get it done in 45 here. You want to go Frostfang most of the time. This is going to be pretty easy to trigger. Your auto attack plus your Q will give you 2 triggers of Frostfang. So that's almost a no-brainer on Sona. She has really good AP scaling as well. So Frostfang 90% of the time. If you're going to get completely steamrolled in lane and you're just going to be too scared to auto attack or even cast Qs on people, like once again, if you're against like a Draven, Draven Leona lane, which is probably your worst nightmare, then you might want to go Nomads, just so you can pick up more coins. But in general, like the vast majority of the time, you should go Frostfang. Because even in like dire situations where you're too scared to auto attack the Draven, you can still Q from a distance, for 825, and that outranges his auto attack and still get procs. At the very minimum, you can just use your Q to get procs for Frostfang. So that's what I would go most of the time. Did I not? Oh, I do have Sensor on there. Okay, I was like, what? Don't I have Ardent Sensor? Ardent Sensor is kind of the marquee item that almost everybody will get on Sona. And for good reason. I mean, it has AP on it. It has great movement speed. It has plus healing and shielding. And every single person that gets touched by your W gets the Ardent Sensor buff. So she's one of the only champions that can legit put Ardent on your entire team consistently, because you're going to have an ability that's on like a 5-second cooldown after CDR, sometimes even like a 4-second cooldown, including your ultimate cooldown stacking. So you can, and Ardent lasts for 6 seconds. So you can have permanent uptime on this on your entire team in a team fight, which obviously is tremendously powerful. Other champions can do that sort of, like Janna can ult and use Redemption to get it on everybody, but she can consistently do it on everybody with her W. So Ardent is really, really strong on Sona. So you want to try to rush Ardent if at all possible in most games. Redemption is also very good, though, because once again, Redemption is great for team fights. That's exactly what Sona wants to be doing. It does give you some reach across the map for 5,500 range, so it does let you influence fights in the mid lane while you're still trapped in the bot lane. Yeah, it has great plus healing and shielding. She is a huge mana hog, so getting that extra 150% mana regen is a very big deal on Sona. If you're not going to go Tear of the Goddess, you have to go Redemption first item. Speaking of which, you kind of have to go Tear of the Goddess on Sona. It's a 750 gold tax. It sucks, but you just can't really function in lane for any length of time without Tear of the Goddess after your first or second pack. Your W is just too expensive, and you really want to be spamming your W in fights and spamming your Q in fights so that you get maximum benefit out of it. So most of the time, you're going to have to go Tear of the Goddess on Sona, which means you're going to be about a third of an item behind the other enchanters like a Nami or a Janna who don't have to buy that. So that's part of what keeps Sona in check in terms of fairness, is that she has to pay the tier tax. Now, when her W used to cost, or when her Q used to cost a lot less mana, and when her W and her Q were much more cost efficient, much more bang for your buck, you could get away last season with just going Redemption. and not having redemption first, and then you don't have to get tier, but it's a lot harder to do that. So, you know, I highly, highly recommend tier. Almost everybody goes tier on Sona. If we look at like pro builds really quickly, virtually every single person's going to go tier. There are some renegades out there who don't go tier, but you pretty much have to go tier. Everybody's going to go tier. That's just the tax you have to pay when you play Sona. And it is nice. I mean, like, you can spam your E to run around the map really quickly. In team fights, you can just spam your W and Q. So it is very, very nice. Like, she does make really, really good use of that mana. You're still going to be running low on mana after a lot of fights. So it's not like you can't use it. And then later on, if it's like really late game, you can combine it to get Seraph's Embrace, which is pretty good on her because she has really good AP ratios too. So that'd be like a third or a fourth item most of the times when you get that Seraph's. But, you know, you have to get tier kind of early on most of the time. Usually your first back you'll get Frostfang, and then after that you get tier, and then after that you kind of decide whether you want to go Censor or Redemption. If you do get tier, then you can rush Censor and not have to worry about the mana regen problems, because Censor only has 50% mana regen, Redemption has 150%, so there's absolutely no way you can rush Ardent Censor without getting a tier first on her. So Ardent is the main attraction. Mikhail's is very good, plus 20% healing and shielding. She loves that. It gives you some defense. It gives you plus 40 magic resist on it. It translates all of your mana regen into health regen, which is nice. It's not entirely necessary on Sona because she heals herself every time she casts W. But it is pretty good. Yeah, heals. I was like, wait, does she heal herself? Yeah, she does heal herself in the most wounded ally. Yes. Okay, duh. I was thinking that, I was like, wait, Tarek does that. They both do that. Okay. So Mikhail's another one. Now, so these are kind of your core items. Redemption, Ardent, Censor, Mikhail's. This is what you'll want to go most games. They synergize so well with each other. They all give plus healing and shielding. Redemption scales really well off of plus healing and shielding. They give you great team fight presence. You have Censor you can put on everyone. Redemption's going to heal everyone. Mikhail's gives you just sort of a nice catch-all, so you can cleanse people, and you get all that extra plus healing and shielding. So these three are the core items you're going to get most of the time on Sona. Now, other items that can be good. Athene's Unholy Grail can be pretty decent. You know, she can trigger her Q quite a lot in team fights to stack up a bunch of damage. And then, of course, she can heal people off of that damage. So, Athene's is something that's really... Athene's is something that's really, like, it's a good item. It has a great sort of value proposition to it, but it has been an item that's just been overshadowed over time. Now that Locket is pretty much unviable, like on most champions, including Sona, you really don't want to be getting Locket most games. It's terrible now. Then that does open up a spot where Athene's could be good. This is particularly good after you get Redemption. So, you know, you'd want like Ardent, Redemption, and then Athene's if you're going to get Athene's. So this would be if they don't have a lot of crowd control on their team that's very dangerous and you feel like you don't need a Mikhail's, then you can go Athene's Unholy Grail instead, because it gives you that extra 5 ability power per 25% base mana regen. So that means you're going to be getting an extra 30 ability power if you get Redemption first. So that would take you up to 60. This has 100 ability power itself, so that gives you 20 more. That takes it up to 80. And then if you have Ardent Censor in addition, it'll take it up to 100. So if you have Ardent Censor, Redemption, and then you buy this, and then you get Frostfang for an extra, that gives, I think, 40 ability power. Or the upgraded version, the Eye of the Watchers or whatever, will give you even more ability power. So it's pretty good once you get to that point. Once you get the 100 ability power, and then once you do 25% of the pre-mitigation damage dealt to champions is basically turned into a heal. So what that means is before magic resist is applied, so on the Sona, for example, that we talked about up here, if you do a Q that does 300 damage, like a level 3 Q, not including the AP ratio, just the base damage, that'd be 300 off of this. You do 25% of that before magic resist is applied, so 300 times 0.25. You would get an extra 75 heal, basically. So the next time you press W, you get a 75 heal. Now, if you're hitting a ton of extra people with that, and if you're including the AP ratio, how much damage that would do. So if you have 200 AP and you have a 2.5 ratio, so if we're doing 200 times 2.5, then all of a sudden you're doing an extra 500 damage plus 300. That would be 800 damage every time you press Q and put it on all of your allies times 0.25. Then you're healing for an extra 200. So you press Q, then you press W, you're healing for an extra 200 off of this. So that's when it starts to get scary, is when you have the 100 ability power, which translates into an extra 250 damage with the 2.5 ratio on the Q. Then extra damage translates into extra healing here. And this healing is also modified by plus healing and shielding. So when you have the 30% plus healing and shielding off of, or plus 20% off of Redemption plus Athene's, then you get an extra 20% here. So it adds up. I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot of extra healing and shielding. It has no internal cooldown, so just if every time you press Q, then you press W right after, they have basically the same cooldown or very similar, then you're going to be getting that extra, 150 to 200 heal a lot of the times off of this, which adds up a lot. So this is a very good third item. You never want to rush this item, but it can be pretty good. You at least want to have Ardent Sensor. And then if you're really far ahead and for some reason you don't really want Redemption, you could get this instead of Redemption. I still think Redemption is going to be more powerful. That active is just so strong. But you could get it after Ardent. But most of the time you would want to go Ardent, Redemption, and then Athene's so that you get all of that extra AP. And so that you're really starting to kick it into high gear with all of the plus healing and shielding, all of the AP. And that stacks up to even more healing off of your passive, okay? But you don't really want to get this with Mikhail's most of the time. It does disable the Mikhail's Harmony, which isn't a huge deal. It's okay, but realistically, a lot of times you're not going to have enough mana or enough money to afford both of those items. You see in most of these games here, they really kind of top out at, like, 2 items, maybe 3 items. Like, you get your tier, you upgrade your Watchers, you have your tier 2 boots most of the time. And then you have enough room for, like, Ardent Sensor plus 1 other item. So you see, like, this person tilting actually did go Ardent plus Athene's. This person went, Athene's plus Redemption. So there is a little wiggle room. Ardent is the most common one. But, yeah, that's pretty much what you should be thinking about in terms of those items and the prioritization with those items. Shirelia's is okay. It does give your team a lot of mobility. It does give you AP. It does give you move speed, cooldown reduction. So there are a couple of people that will get Shirelia's in here. I don't see very many, but, now this was from a month ago, so this is really, like, outdated data here. But Shirelia's, if you really have a team that wants to move forward and just dash into them really fast, you already kind of do that with your E by giving people movement speed. But if you have, like, an Olaf or a Nasus or a Jax or just something else, you can get a Shirelia's. That also helps you rotate around the map, and it helps make you safer so you can get away from stuff. Shirelia's becomes a lot more attractive if you run for the Ingenious, because then that's going to give a 40% cooldown on it. So if you're going the Ingenious Hunter build and you end up getting something like, Mikhail's Redemption, then you could go Shirelia's after that if you want. You probably still want Ardent instead. So it's hard to think of a lot of situations where you would want Shirelia's on Sona, but if you, really want to boost your team into combat, you can do that. Once again, her team fighting scales so hard that you really want team fight items like Redemption or Ardent Sensor or even Athene's before you would get a Shirelia's most of the time. But it is on the table. It is okay on her if you really want that hard engage or you want a bit more safety. Now, Zeke's and Banner are odd buys. You really don't want to have to buy these unless it's an absolute necessity. But you would get these if they have a Fed 8 AD Assassin and you just really need some protection. So, like, if they have a Talon who's like 5-0 or a Zed who's 5-0, you're going to have to go Code Red and just make sure that you don't die because you're going to have a huge bullseye on your head. Everyone knows Sona's super squishy. She has virtually no defensive steroids. So you might have to get Zeke's, gets you 60 armor, 30 magic resist. This will also help buff up your on-hit 80 carry, so when you ult, that'll let your Kaisa do a lot more damage, or your Varus, or your Kog'Maw, or anyone else who's running all of these kind of on-hit, lots of attack speed builds. That could be pretty decent. It's not the best thing on Sona, but once again, this is just code red. I need 60 armor now, or I'm going to keep dying. Banner's another thing. If your team's really far behind and you just want to be able to split push, just to put that minion in a side wave and just hope you can stall out the game long enough before your team becomes relevant, you can get Banner. That's going to be a better buy if you have the Ingenious Hunter rune. But it's the same thing, 30 magic resist, 60 armor. It does give you more movement speed because you have Raptor Cloak around towers, which can be relevant when you're trying to do a lot of tower defense type of stuff. So it's okay. Once again, not ideal, but just kind of code red. You're losing the game, probably, but you just need to stop dying. Zeke's is probably a better option than Banner most of the time. But, you know, both of these are okay options. And then I have it kind of just explained and linked here why you would get these different items. But it's pretty much what I just explained. Okay, and matchup-wise, and this will be the end of the video here. Well, I guess it will end up being about an hour, but we'll keep it a little bit under an hour. Your best matchups are going to be against really passive lanes. So things like Braum, Tomkins, Janna, Ezreal, stuff that's just going to let you farm off, where you can just, you know, put a little bit of mild harassment down. You don't have to worry about all-in damage. And she's going to be best with champions that are very aggressive early, and champions that have a lot of CC that they can chain together with your ult. So, like, Miss Fortune is the classic pick with Sona. They both can be very aggressive early on, can apply a lot of trading, and then once you both hit 6, you can ult with Sona, and then Miss Fortune ults. That's a wombo combo for team fights that just tears people up. It's been going on since Season 1. Very, very classic pairing. Now, Miss Fortune is not amazing in this meta. She's okay, but Sona's a really good pick with her for those reasons. Caitlyn's similar. Lots of early game pressure. You don't have that wombo combo as you do with Miss Fortune, but it does apply a lot of pressure. You can poke people out. You can both do a lot of damage to towers. If someone steps on a trap, you can ult them and probably blow them up post 6. So that's always on the table. And then Varus is very similar. Lots of good early game pressure. Once he ults somebody, you can ult them, or vice versa, and you can chain that together. Varus is a really good team fighter as well. So that's a good combo. Ashe is another good combo. You hit somebody with the arrow, then ult him. Jhin is okay. You know, you can ult him. He hits him with the W and blow him up. So all of these champs, she's not really, like, terrible with any AD carry. She's not amazing with people who don't get a lot of attack speed. So she's not... So that your Ardent Sensor is not going to be as effective, right? So she's not amazing with Ezreal. She's not amazing with Jhin. She's better with the Ginsu users who are going to be getting a lot of attack speed, because then they can trigger Ardent Sensor more. But she's okay with those champs. Now, champions you don't want to see are very hardcore, hard engage, heavy damage early game champs. So things like Leona, Zyra, you do not want to see those. They will blow you up, do a lot of damage. Nami's not you do not want to see Nami most of the time, because she can out-trade you early on, and if she ever hits a bubble on you, it's probably lights out. So Nami's kind of a tough matchup too. Draven is probably your worst nightmare early on. Like, Draven plus either Zyra or Leona is just a nightmare because they can just blow you up hardcore early on. Jhin, very similar to Draven, does similar damage early on. Not quite as much, but he's close. So you really don't want to pick Sona into Jhin or Draven at all. You know, the best matchup that's very common probably would be Janna, because you're going to get to farm with Janna. You can beat her up in team fights later on because you're going to outscale her. She's better in smaller skirmishes than you are, and she's safer than you are, but at the same time, she's not going to be able to go in and kill you. So you're both just going to scale, and a lot of times Sona's going to scale harder. And Janna's very popular right now, so Sona is a pretty respectable early game champion. So, you know, Janna is picked a lot of times into something like Nami, so you can survive the early game sort of as Janna. Nami's going to bully you out, but you can feel confident that you're going to outscale Nami later. But with Sona, Sona can harass Janna out early and scale to keep up with her later in the game. So Sona is a better pick against Janna than Nami is, and those are very common matchups right now. And then Sona also has pretty good matchups against someone like Lulu for similar reasons. You can scale with her and you can out-pressure her early. So not a great matchup against Nami early on, but it is a pretty good matchup against Janna and Lulu, who are both very popular. And she does have a pretty high win rate right now, so she's the third highest, or at least rating of the support on Analytics as far as like raw win rates go. She's also the third in that. So pretty good. She's just outclassed a little bit by Nami and Janna right now, but Janna's becoming a very popular ban. And like I said, I think Nami, honestly, if we're being honest, 8.7 is probably better than Sona most of the time. But if it gets to like 3 items, if you both have Ardent, Redemption, and either Athene's or Mikhail's, then Sona's going to be more powerful at that point in team fights. Soraka's another one who's really good. You don't really want to... You can pick her in a Soraka. It's going to be a farm off. Soraka's going to out heal you later, but you're going to have more utility than she does with your ultimate, with your ability to put Ardent Sensor on everybody. So I'd say the Soraka matchup's probably about even. It's going to come down to who has the better scaling team. But she's an okay pick in a Soraka as well. You just don't like the Zyra, the Brands. You want to stay away from that. And not a lot of people are picking Zyra and Brand right now. And not a lot of people are picking Leona as much, as of 8.7 at least. And so I think she's pretty well positioned in this meta. I think she's pretty strong. Best case scenario, as I keep saying, is against sort of passive lanes, against Ezreal's, Janna's, stuff like that early on. But that's going to be it for this guide. Thank you very much. Hopefully this helps you out. Remember, the key thing to keep in mind, do not pick her into all lanes. Pick her into safe lanes. Try to scale up, apply as much pressure as you can, but don't overcommit. Make sure you get Tear of the Goddess early on. Think very carefully about your runes and what you need, the reasons that we talked about. Think carefully about your items. And then make sure, especially when you're trying to sustain in lane, you need to do it through trades. You need to make sure you're healing 2 people with your W, and ideally that you're using that shield as well. That is the #1 biggest thing that I see Sonas do wrong, is they are very inefficient with their W. So make sure at a bare minimum you're healing 2 people and you are actively trading with your Q, and you're going to take an auto attack back so that you're using that shield off of W as well. If you do that, you will have a much, much better time with Sona. Okay, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Have a good day, and I'll see you next time.